All right, let's get into this because this just dropped, and I want to make sure you have it right now before anybody else is even talking about it. A brand new rule has been officially released by the Social Security Administration. And as of right now, it has not hit the mainstream news cycle. Nobody is covering it yet. I pulled this directly from the SSA's internal section for emergency messages, and I want to walk you through exactly what it says, what it means, and most importantly, what it means for your benefits. The effective date on this is February 11th, 2026. The rule designation is EM 26002. And while the language inside this document is thick with Social Security terminology that is not exactly written for the general public, I am going to break it down in plain language so you actually understand what is happening and why it matters to you. Let me give you the big picture summary first, and then we will go through the details. This new rule is part of what is called the CDR review process. CDR stands for Continuing Disability Review, which is essentially the process the SSA uses to periodically check in on benefit recipients to make sure their cases are still accurate, current, and being handled correctly. What this emergency message is doing is telling local field offices, disability determination services representatives, and field office operations groups to change the order in which they prioritize those reviews. Specifically, they are being directed to work the highest priority CDRs first rather than lower priority ones. And here is why that matters for you personally. The two categories being pushed to the very top of that priority list are categories where a significant number of SSI recipients have either had their benefits improperly reduced or cut off entirely. Reviewing those cases first means a lot of people are going to see their benefits go up. We are talking about thousands upon thousands of individuals over the next 6 to 12 months, potentially receiving benefit increases. They should have been getting all along, but were not because of how the rules were applied or changed over time. Now, to understand why these two specific categories are at the top of the list, you need a little bit of background, and I promise this is worth understanding because it explains everything. The first category involves SSI recipients whose benefits were reduced or eliminated because of something called the In-Kind Support and Maintenance Rule, which most people just call the ISM rule. Here is what that rule does. It reduces your SSI benefits if you are receiving support from other people, whether that is food, housing, or financial help. So historically, if someone in your family was buying you groceries or you were living with a relative who was covering your rent, the SSA would reduce your SSI check because of that outside support, the logic being that your actual need is lower if other people are helping cover your expenses. Now, here is where things changed significantly. Under the previous administration, the commissioner at the time recognized that SSI recipients were in an extraordinarily difficult financial position due to the economic environment, inflation, and the general cost of living crisis that hit lower-income Americans the hardest. So they made changes to how the ISM rule was applied. First, they eliminated food from the equation entirely. If someone is giving you food or buying you groceries, that no longer counts against your SSI benefits. They also restructured the housing portion so that as long as you are contributing something toward your housing costs, a specific dollar amount toward rent, for example, you can maintain your full SSI benefit without a reduction. These were genuinely meaningful changes that put more money in the pockets of some of the most financially vulnerable Americans in the country. The problem is that not everyone who should have benefited from those rule changes actually had their cases updated to reflect them. Some people never knew the rules changed. Some people never reached out to the SSA. Some cases just never got the administrative update they needed. So right now there are SSI recipients out there who are still receiving a reduced benefit amount based on the old rules when they should actually be receiving a higher payment under the new rules. And this emergency message is essentially directing the SSA to go find those people and fix it. The 2026 maximum SSI benefit is $967 per month. If you are on SSI and you're not receiving that full amount, that is your signal right now to pay attention. You could be in that first priority category. You could be one of the people this review is specifically designed to identify and help. Over the next 6 to 12 months, as the SSA works through these cases under the new priority structure, a significant number of SSI recipients are going to see their monthly payment increase. That is real money. That is money that was supposed to be there and was not, and the system is now being directed to correct that. The second category at the top of the priority list involves a situation that became genuinely politically damaging and frankly represents one of the more troubling chapters in recent SSA history. This involves the former Inspector General of the SSA, Gail Ennis, who resigned in June of 2024 after a tenure that generated significant controversy. The Inspector General is essentially the top watchdog position at the SSA, the person responsible for identifying fraud, abuse, and improper payments. And under her leadership, the office launched an aggressive anti-fraud campaign that ended up sweeping up a large number of SSI recipients who had received COVID stimulus payments during the pandemic. Here is what happened. Those stimulus payments were explicitly designated as not counting toward the SSI resource limit. The whole point was that they were emergency relief and should not affect benefit eligibility. But the IG office sent out a wave of letters notifying SSI recipients that their benefits were being reduced or terminated because their account balances had gone over the resource limit, with that excess being attributed to the stimulus payments they had received. Whistleblowers inside the agency raised alarms. They said this was wrong. They said it was illegal. The Department of Justice's Inspector General Michael Horowitz conducted an investigation and found that the office had failed to properly notify affected individuals before penalizing them, which constituted a due process violation. People were receiving letters saying their benefits were being cut, and they were not being given adequate information about what was happening or what their rights were. The Council of the Inspectors General on Integrity and Efficiency, which is the oversight body that watches over individual Inspector General offices, also opened a probe. Reports emerged of whistleblower retaliation within the office, falling employee morale, staff departures, and allegations that Ennis had obstructed the investigation by withholding documents and directing staff not to cooperate with interviews. By the time she resigned, the SSA IG office ranked 430 out of 459 subcomponent agencies in the federal government's best places to work rankings. It was a significant institutional failure, and the people who paid the price were disabled and elderly Americans who had their benefits taken away improperly. So where does this new emergency message fit into all of that history? It fits in as a corrective signal. The administration, through SSA Commissioner Frank Bisignano, is now directing the agency to prioritize the review of cases where SSI recipients lost or had their benefits reduced as a result of that whole situation. The goal being to identify those individuals, reassess their cases under the proper rules, and restore benefits that should never have been taken away in the first place. If you or someone you know had SSI benefits reduced or stopped during that period, and you believe it was connected to stimulus payments or the ISM rule, this is the moment to pay close attention because your case may be in that first wave of priority reviews. Now let me explain how the priority structure in this emergency message actually works, because the SSA has laid it out in a tiered chart, and I want to make sure you understand where different types of cases fall. At the top of the chart sits what is called Profile C, which is described as a high error propensity category. These are cases where there is a greater likelihood that something in the file is not accurate, whether that means someone is receiving more than they should be or less than they should be. Within that category, there are specific case types that have been flagged for priority review. Examples include a self-employed SSI recipient living with family where there is variable income and potential in-kind support issues, or a case where IRS data has flagged unreported wages. There are also cases involving minor recipients where funds were placed in dedicated accounts for specific essential purposes like medical needs, and those accounts are flagged for monitoring. These cases are getting looked at first because the error rate in these situations has historically been high. Now, here is the part that is genuinely a bit ironic about all of this. The Profile C cases, the ones being reviewed most aggressively and most urgently, are largely cases where the expected outcome of the review is that those individuals should be receiving more money, not less. because the underlying issue with a large portion of these cases is that the rule changes from the prior administration were never properly applied to their files. So the review process, which typically makes people nervous because it usually carries the risk of benefit reduction, is in this case going to result in benefit increases for many of the people being reviewed first. That is genuinely unusual, and it is worth understanding clearly so that if you receive a notice about your case being reviewed, you do not panic. Depending on where your case falls in this priority structure, a review might actually be good news for you. That said, I want to be clear and honest with you about the full picture because you deserve the complete story. While a significant number of SSI recipients in these priority categories are going to see benefit increases, there will also be people going through the review process who are outside the rules, meaning they are currently receiving benefits or benefit amounts that the SSA determines they are not entitled to under the current guidelines. Those individuals may face reductions or overpayment situations. The review process is being expanded and intensified across the board. If you are a current SSI recipient, now is the time to make sure your own case is accurate. Know what rules apply to you. Know whether your benefit amount reflects the current ISM rule changes. Know whether any income, housing support, or outside assistance in your life has been properly reported and properly accounted for under the current guidelines. For those of you who are lower on the priority chart, meaning your case type falls into a category that the SSA considers less urgent for review, do not interpret that as meaning you are permanently off the radar. The SSA has signaled that the overall volume of CDR reviews is increasing significantly. Even if you are not in the first wave, the second wave is coming. These reviews are going to touch everyone eventually. Being lower priority just means more time, not permanent immunity. Use that time wisely. Get your documentation in order. Make sure your earnings, your living situation, and any outside support you receive are properly reported and up to date. The broader context here is important to understand. SSI benefits in this country are genuinely not enough to live on independently. The maximum is $967 per month in 2026. That is the reality of what the most vulnerable Americans are trying to survive on, the fact that so many of them have been receiving less than that maximum due to rule application issues or due to the improper enforcement actions from a few years ago, makes what this emergency message is doing genuinely significant. Getting those people to their correct benefit level does not solve the larger systemic problem, but it is real money for real people who need it. The next thing I am going to be breaking down for you is a full walkthrough of each individual priority category in this new structure so that you can identify specifically where your case likely falls and how soon you might be looking at a review. That means whether you are receiving retirement benefits, disability benefits, SSI, survivor benefits, or anything else through the Social Security system, you will be able to look at your own situation and get a realistic sense of your timeline and what to expect. That breakdown is coming very shortly, and it is going to be one of the more useful things I have put out for this community because these are internal SSA categories that you are genuinely not supposed to know about unless someone walks you through them. For right now, the summary is this. A new SSA emergency message effective February 11th, 2026 has restructured the priority order for CDR reviews. Two categories of SSI recipients sit at the very top of that priority list. The first are those who had their benefits reduced or eliminated due to improper application of COVID stimulus rules. The second are those who never had their benefits updated to reflect the rule changes made under the prior administration regarding food and housing support. If you are an SSI recipient not receiving the 2026 maximum of $967, there is a real possibility your case is in one of these priority categories and that a review could result in your benefit going up. Reviews are expanding across the entire system, so regardless of where your case falls on the priority chart, getting your documentation and records accurate right now is the smartest thing you can do. We will get into the full category breakdown in the next video. Stay tuned for that because it is going to matter for a lot of you.